0737 local time, October 27th, 2025, Eastern Caribbean Sea. Morning light spread across the open Caribbean, bright and calm, broken only by the deep, steady pulse of USCGC Hamilton's twin diesel engines. The sea held at 1.5 meters, wind from the east at 12 knots. Visibility stretched to 12 miles, perfect conditions for patrol. On the bridge, the air carried the mixed scent of coffee and salt. Crew members spoke quietly as they worked through the morning routine. Then the radar alarm cut across the calm. A faint contact appeared at 42 nautical miles, bearing 187, moving at 21 knots. No AIS signal, no navigation lights, no reply to standard identification calls. "Got a runner," the operations officer said under his breath. Inside the Combat Information Center, green and amber screens came alive. The first contact, now marked Sierra 1, matched the profile of a steel-hulled go-fast boat, a type often favored by Caribbean smuggling crews. Its track pushed northwest across open water. Seconds later, a second radar return appeared. Sierra 2, larger, heavier, approaching from the opposite direction. Within moments, the system resolved its course and radar signature. Venezuelan Navy Guaycamacuto-class patrol ship, range 40 miles, closing fast. If neither vessel changed course, the two tracks would cross in 12 minutes. On Hamilton's bridge, conversation stopped. The commanding officer leaned over the chart table, tracing bearings with a pencil. "That's not coincidence," he said quietly. "They're crossing our intercept box." He didn't need to explain the rest. Everyone already understood. The Coast Guard's mission that morning was to intercept traffickers in international waters, not to play a dangerous game with a foreign navy. But now both realities had collided in the same stretch of sea. Inside CIC, the red lights dimmed further as technicians refined the frequency bands. The electronic support measures console listened for radar sweeps or targeting signals. Nothing yet. The surface plot now showed 3 icons closing into a tightening triangle: Hamilton, the Go Fast, and the Venezuelan patrol ship. Above the main screen, one line glowed: live feed sector Key West via District 7. Everything was being transmitted in real time. The captain's voice came over the circuit, calm and sharp. "Hold course. Record everything." At 0741, the bridge sent standard hails. "Unidentified vessel, this is United States Coast Guard cutter Hamilton, operating in international waters. You are closing at high speed. Identify yourself immediately." Silence, then static. "Try channel 13, the COEMS officer said. Another hail. Nothing. The Venezuelan ship stayed on course, increasing to 22 knots, its bow slicing clean through the swell. Through binoculars, its shape came into focus. Gray hull, forward gun mount, radar dome turning. Definitely military, not civilian, not accidental. The silence was a message all by itself. The captain gave a simple order. "Set condition 3, prepare launch for the Dolphin." The deck crew moved instantly. On the flight deck, the orange and white MH-65 Dolphin helicopter rolled into position. Rotor blades unfolded beneath the morning glare. Fuel lines snapped free. The rotors began to turn. Below, the 26-foot over-the-horizon RHIB was ready. Cameras came online. Body cams started recording. In under 2 minutes, the cutter shifted from routine patrol to full intercept posture. Efficient, deliberate, practiced 100 times before. At 0746, the Dolphin lifted off, rotor wash scattering spray across the stern. From the aircraft's sensors, the picture widened. 3 vessels, 3 intentions. 1 smuggler trying to run, 1 naval ship maneuvering to interfere, 1 Coast Guard cutter holding the narrow line between law enforcement and confrontation. Inside CIC, technicians tracked bearings and closure rates. The geometry tightened. The Venezuelan patrol ship's projected path would pass less than 800 yards from Hamilton's bow. "Maintain speed," the captain ordered. "If we give them the right-of-way, we hand them the narrative." The helmsman's grip tightened. "Aye, sir, holding steady." The pressure rose quietly, like heat building under steel. At 0749, the Go Fast turned sharply north, straight back into the intercept zone. Whether by panic or intent, it pulled both larger vessels into a dangerous triangle. "They're using us as cover," the XO said. The captain nodded once. "Then we use the rule book." The RHIB splashed into the water, engines roaring as 6 boarding officers powered forward. Spray flashed in the sunlight as the inflatable leapt through the chop. Above them, the Dolphin fired a single red flare, a non-lethal international warning signal, cutting across the sky between the ships. The flare burned crimson, reflecting in Hamilton's bridge windows and across the gray hull of the Venezuelan vessel. For 10 seconds, the sea seemed to hold its breath. Engines idled, radios hissed. Every person aboard felt the weight of that pause, proof that peace at sea can hang by something thinner than a line on radar. Then the pursuit resumed. The RHIB drove through the waves, closing meter by meter. The cutter held course, instruments steady, cameras rolling. The morning sun climbed higher, flashing off steel and spray as the United States Coast Guard prepared to make contact under the eyes of a watching command. From Hamilton's bridge, the scene unfolded across monitors and binoculars like a careful choreography of pressure, discipline, and raw restraint. At 07:57, the RHIB drew up on the go fast, spray exploding over the bow like shattered glass. The Dolphin hovered at 400 feet, its optical turret sweeping the chase with infrared. Inside CIC, operators spoke in clipped phrases. Range to target, bearing drift, closure rate. The room hummed with electronics and the constant tap of keys. On the live feed, the smuggler's boat slammed through the swells. 3 heat signatures crouched low near the stern, throwing objects overboard. Packages hitting the sea and blooming into white splashes on radar. Evidence dump confirmed, the sensor technician called. Record everything. On Hamilton, the commanding officer watched all 3 vessels converge on the tactical display. The Venezuelan patrol ship, Sierra 2, had now shifted course to shadow Hamilton's starboard quarter, holding just under 1,000 yards. Its speed matched the cutter almost perfectly, as if the 2 ships were joined by an invisible line. Bridge, CIC, Venezuelan hull, now 0.8 nautical miles, bearing 130 relative, the watch supervisor reported. Copy, the captain said. His eyes never left the window. Keep them there. Don't blink. On the starboard bridge wing, sailors scanned through binoculars. The Venezuelan ship loomed in the glare, deck crew visible along the rails, helmets catching the light. Its forward gun mount sat slightly off-axis, high enough to signal readiness, low enough to deny intent. It was posture, pure and unmistakable. At 08:02, the RHIB made contact. Boarding officers threw hooks over the Go-Fast's gunnel and secured the hull. The roar of twin outboards gave way to shouted commands in English, protests in Spanish, and then sudden silence. Moments later, the radio call came through. Boarding team reports suspects secured, cargo confirmed, multiple bales of suspected contraband, approximately 1 ton. Copy, RHIB, the XO answered. Maintain chain of custody, we've got company watching. Because the Venezuelan ship still had not turned away, it was getting closer. At 08:06, CIC showed its course edging tighter toward Hamilton's flank, bearing difference down to 70 degrees, range shrinking by the yard. The electronic support console picked up a faint X-band spike, radar in scan mode. Not targeting, but close enough to sharpen every nerve on the bridge. Captain, the tactical officer said, they're brushing the boundary cone. Noted, the captain replied. Calm and steady. We stay legal. We stay filmed. We stay professional. He stepped onto the bridge wing. The morning wind pulled at his jacket collar. The smell of aviation fuel hung in the air. Out across the sea, the Venezuelan cutter's turbines rumbled low and even. Between them lay a mile of blue water, now tense enough to feel electric. Inside CIC, every station worked from procedure. One operator logged bearings to the 10th, range to the yard, RPM estimates by wake pattern. Another noted the continued absence of AIS. On the large repeater display, a green wedge marked Hamilton's safe water cone, the space no foreign ship was supposed to enter. Helm, maintain 20 knots, steady course 085, the captain ordered. Aye, sir, 20 knots, 085. On the aft deck, the RHIB returned, engines roaring as it climbed back toward the cradle. Boarding officers came aboard soaked through, faces streaked with salt and adrenaline. Evidence crates shone wet and pale under deck lights. Cameras kept rolling as crew members logged times and sealed each package. The Coast Guard's discipline was precise, almost ritualistic. Every clip, every tag, every word, documented. At 0812, the Dolphin banked wide and circled both ships in slow arcs. From above, the geometry was exact. One smuggler stopped, one cutter holding course, one foreign patrol ship pressing the edge of provocation. The pilot transmitted a coded burst, then flashed a non-lethal laser warning across the Venezuelan bridge, a silent signal preserved in the optical log. On Hamilton's bridge, restraint had become something physical. Shoulders locked, jaws set, breathing measured, every instinct pushed toward action. Professionalism demanded endurance. "We do not drift into their narrative," the captain reminded them. "They want a reaction. We give them procedure." At 0816, the Venezuelan ship crossed within 800 yards. Too close. Its searchlights flashed once, white beams sweeping the sea like a stage performance. No voice call, no signal flags, only a display of presence. "They're filming," the XO muttered. "They want the footage." "Good," the captain said. "So do we." At 0819, the Dolphin called bingo fuel and turned back toward Hamilton, still recording until the last second. The Venezuelan ship matched speed again, bow pointed straight ahead. Both hulls moved in parallel now, like mirrored steel on open water. The loudest sound was the sea itself, with engines pulsing beneath it. "In CIC, someone whispered, it's like a duel without bullets." "Exactly," the watch supervisor replied. "And the first one to flinch loses." By 0822, the sun had climbed high enough to flatten the sea into sheets of blinding silver. The cutter stayed steady. The Venezuelan ship held its course. Between them lay 1,000 yards of charged silence, controlled, deliberate, and so fragile that even the gulls overhead seemed to hesitate before crossing that invisible line. At 0827, the tension finally began to shift. Not through words, but through motion. The Venezuelan patrol ship's engines changed tone, a deep mechanical exhale rolling across the flat sea. It held position for nearly a full minute, then slowly turned west. No radio call, no signal flags, just a quiet, deliberate withdrawal. Its wake shimmered in the late morning light, spreading across the water like a fading mark. On Hamilton's bridge, the captain gave a small nod. "Maintain visual until she's out of range." "Aye, sir," came the reply in unison. Inside CIC, every second was logged. At 0831, the Venezuelan vessel dropped beyond 2 miles. By 0839, it was nothing more than a faint radar trace. Its transponder remained silent to the end. Hamilton eased back to patrol speed. The captain stepped inside, poured a cup of coffee, and finally released the breath he'd been holding for nearly an hour. "Log it," he said. "Interference, no escalation." A short entry, but one that would carry far beyond the Caribbean. In Washington, it was 0827 Eastern Time. The live feed from Hamilton had already reached the National Security Council. Analysts from the Pentagon, Homeland Security, and the State Department watched the encounter replay in silence. On the situation map, 2 icons, red and blue, circled each other, never touching. Across the briefing screen, a phrase appeared: maritime interference. It sounded technical, almost neutral, but everyone in the room understood what it meant. For weeks, Venezuelan patrols had been shadowing U.S. operations near Grenada and Dominica, following earlier incidents involving smuggling vessels tied to their navy. Caracas had accused Washington of aggressive actions at sea. Now, with Hamilton's footage, the U.S. had clear evidence of another escalation, this time without a single shot. The senior director at the NSC spoke first. This wasn't about weapons, it was about testing resolve. "And?" the National Security Advisor asked. A brief pause. "We held the line. They were looking for a reaction. Instead, they got discipline. On record." Back aboard Hamilton, the crew moved with quiet focus. The flight deck was cleaned down. The Dolphin helicopter was refueled and secured. The RHIB team, still soaked with seawater and sweat, stacked seized cargo and labeled crates. Roughly 1.1 metric tons of narcotics and chemical materials. Technicians documented everything: timestamps, samples, signatures. The air carried the smell of salt and diesel, but the mood wasn't celebratory. It was controlled, professional, steady. By 0846, the horizon ahead was clear. The Venezuelan ship had disappeared into the haze, its silence unbroken. High above, a Navy P-8 Poseidon circled, capturing high-resolution imagery and relaying it back to Florida. Infrared scans showed the fading wake, the heat signature of Hamilton's engines, and the RHIB returning. Every detail preserved. A complete digital record. Clear, verifiable, unfiltered. As the Caribbean shifted into a bright blue-green under the rising sun, light flashed off the cutter's hull. The American flag moved steadily in the breeze. Crew members gathered quietly on the aft deck, faces marked with salt, eyes tired but focused. No loud voices, no celebration. They all knew what had just happened. They had operated within sight of a foreign warship, secured their objective, and upheld the law in international waters, without crossing a line. The executive officer stepped beside the captain on the bridge wing. "Sir," he said quietly, "that was closer than anyone will ever realize." The captain nodded. "That's the job. No hesitation, no noise." He looked out toward the horizon where the other ship had vanished. In this line of work, silence speaks. Hours later, in briefing rooms and media discussions, that silence would be interpreted in many different ways. For some, it showed strength, the ability to stay composed under pressure. For others, it might look like restraint taken too far, an opening for future challenges. But for the crew of Hamilton, the meaning was simpler: control, discipline, focus. As the cutter resumed its course toward Puerto Rico, the steady vibration of its engines returned, a low, confident rhythm. Above, gulls circled in the sunlight. Below deck, evidence was secured and reports transmitted. The sea returned to calm. But the record remained. Every bearing, every image, every second of measured restraint stored far beyond the horizon. That morning, Hamilton didn't just stop a smuggling run. It demonstrated something quieter. Real strength doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it's measured in control. If you think strength is about discipline, not just force, share your perspective below. Was holding back the right move? Or should situations like this be met with a firmer response? Subscribe for more real-world stories of operations at sea, where decisions matter, and history often unfolds in silence.